Hey all. This is Six Path Weeb, welcome back to the channel, your go-to spot for anime fanfics, wild what-ifs, and epic reimaginings. Today's topic. What if Naruko's scroll training gave her the edge? Part 2. We're diving back into this alternate Naruto universe where Naruko's secret training takes her down a path of power, growth, and unexpected turns. Quick disclaimer. This content is purely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I don't own any of the anime footage used, huge respect to the original creators and copyright holders. Let's get into it, guys. Grab your snacks, summon your chakra, and let's explore what happens when Naruko takes destiny into her own hands. Naruko stood alert as the sudden invasion began, watching as shinobi quickly engaged in defending the village from the unexpected arrival of ninja from the hidden sand and sound villages. Her sharp eyes caught sight of Tamari and her brother Kankuro swiftly retreating into the nearby forest with Gaara in tow. Boom! A loud explosion echoed, drawing Naruko's gaze skyward. A mysterious, glowing purple barrier had appeared out of nowhere. Determined to understand what was happening, Naruko leapt into action, bouncing expertly off the surrounding walls until she reached a better vantage point. From what she could tell, it looked like a four-flame formation, something she'd read about during her training. She focused on the four shinobi maintaining the barrier. The first one she noticed was a large boy with bright orange eyes and tufts of orange hair forming a mohawk-like style. He wore a sleeveless tunic with the Sound 4 insignia, black arm warmers, cropped pants, and a purple rope belt, along with a unique necklace made of metal and circular beads. The next was a red-haired girl with wild, untamed locks. She wore a tan tunic over black shorts and a hat with bandages at the sides. Her expression was sharp and alert. Another figure had 6 arms, an unusual trait. He had a deep tan, black shaggy hair, and wore a black sleeveless outfit under a tunic with a rope belt. A headband marked his allegiance, and his attire was completed with arm warmers and shinobi sandals. Lastly, Naruko spotted a person with 2 heads, though one appeared to be sleeping. The visible one had dark gray hair with long bangs that shadowed one eye. They wore a brown tunic, wristbands, and carried a large scroll on their back. Their expression was unreadable but calm. Naruko's eyes then turned to what was happening inside the barrier, and her heart skipped a beat. Inside the glowing dome stood her beloved mentor, the third Hokage, facing none other than Hashirama, Tobirama, and Orochimaru. She couldn't let her grandfather figure, her Gigi, face them alone. With determination, Naruko ran straight toward the barrier, ignoring the red-haired girl's rude comments calling her foolish. Forming hand signs, she called out. Sealing technique, temporal distortion. Her glowing yellow hand touched the barrier, and the protective field gently opened, allowing her, and someone slightly taller, to pass through. Without hesitation, Naruko darted inside, ignoring the shocked expressions from nearby ninja who had witnessed the feat. Her focus narrowed on the fierce battle ahead, her Gigi giving his all against the legendary shinobi. She saw Hashirama preparing for a powerful wood-style technique. Knowing she had to act fast, Naruko surged forward, channeling chakra into her body. A radiant blue light flickered in her palm. Sealing technique, restriction of the spirit guardian. With grace and strength, she aimed for Hashirama's armor. Her chakra sealed away the energy animating his form, causing him to gently disperse into fluttering, paper-like fragments. Before vanishing, he gave her a proud smile. Landing atop a tree branch formed by Hashirama's own jutsu, she caught her breath, only to be suddenly hit, sending her flying through branches. She landed partly embedded in a tree's trunk, blinking up at the sky. Tobirama stood nearby, watching her with an expression that mixed fondness and regret. Rising slowly, Naruko stood firm on another branch. She quickly formed 10 shadow clones. Help Gigi, alright? I heard Orochimaru is incredibly tricky. Stay sharp, she said, giving her clones a nod. They responded in unison and dashed toward the battle. Naruko turned back to Tobirama, now ready to face her teacher. The first Hokage's brother looked at her with a soft smile. Naruko. Even though it's only been 10 days since we trained together, I can see how much you've grown. But I'm afraid I placed a subtle illusion on you during our last spar, Tobirama said kindly. It's not real, but in this illusion, you've already lost. Naruko dropped to one knee, pretending to fall under the genjutsu. But as Tobirama approached, she smiled gently. You didn't realize I'd switched places with a clone. In a flash, her true self reappeared behind him, one hand pressing a seal onto his back. Sealing technique, restriction of the spirit guardian. With quiet dignity, Tobirama's body became still, his expression peaceful as he collapsed onto the roof tiles below. Naruko gave a grateful smile, then quickly turned to rejoin the main fight. "I'll see you again, sensei," she whispered, unaware of the small smile that remained on Tobarama's face even after she left. Meanwhile, the third Hokage, Hiruzen, was holding his own against Orochimaru. Though aging, he remained sharp and determined. Orochimaru sent a wave of snake summons at him, but Hiruzen deftly dodged, staying light on his feet. A shadow clone of Naruko appeared just in time, kicking away a stray serpent before being dispelled by Orochimaru's next strike. Although Hiruzen knew it was just a clone, seeing Naruko, even as an illusion, hurt in front of him stirred protective instincts. He swung his adamantine staff in a wide arc, clearing away the summoned snakes. Orochimaru pressed on, still trying to break his mentor's defenses. But now, with Naruko's support arriving, both in clones and spirit, the tide of the battle began to shift. Orochimaru smiled as he gracefully moved through the few shadow clones of Naruko that had appeared to assist Hiruzen. However, he noticed something strange: the clones didn't vanish even after he had sent Tobarama to locate her. Was she hiding? Regardless, it shouldn't take long before Tobarama found her. With a confident expression, Orochimaru raised his sword, the Kusanagi blade, toward his former teacher. The weapon was elegant, shaped like a traditional katana. Its handle was wrapped in black cloth with white diamond patterns, a simple golden guard, and a sleek black blade outlined with a sharp white edge. "Hiruzen. This is where it ends," Orochimaru declared, lunging toward his former master with precision. But before the strike could land, a sudden kick from behind launched him backward. A summoned snake intervened just in time to cushion his impact against the barrier. Orochimaru's eyes widened in surprise. Standing before him was Naruko Uzumaki. Her green jacket was in tatters, and her black long-sleeved shirt was torn in several places from the battle. "Sorry, Orochimaru. But I won't let you harm the Hokage," Naruko said firmly, her hands beginning to channel chakra. "As a kunoichi of the Hidden Leaf, it's my duty to protect the will of fire. My mentors taught me that, and I won't let their teachings go to waste," she declared as she activated a high-speed technique. "Flash step," Naruko shouted, vanishing in an instant. Orochimaru had no time to react before a sudden force struck his side, sending him across the length of the protective barrier and into it. This time, the impact didn't go unnoticed. Orochimaru groaned as he was helped up by one of his summoned snakes, his arm temporarily weakened from the clash. From the ground, Naruko knelt, gripping her side as Hiruzen rushed to her. "Naruko, are you all right?" he asked, concern in his voice, all while keeping his gaze trained on Orochimaru. Naruko gave a tired nod. "I'll be fine. Just need to recover some chakra. You wouldn't happen to have a chakra pill, would you?" she asked, exhausted. Without a word, Hiruzen dropped one near her. She picked it up, gave him a thankful glance, and swallowed it. Almost immediately, her chakra began to replenish. She stood, gathering her strength and channeling healing energy through her body, boosted by the Nine Tails chakra within her. She turned toward Orochimaru and noticed something was off. The Kusanagi blade wasn't in his hand. A sudden movement behind her made her spin around, just in time to see the sword heading toward Hiruzen. Without hesitation, she jumped forward, shielding him. The blade grazed her shoulder, and she dropped to her knees, the strain overwhelming her. Hiruzen caught her before she could collapse completely. "Naruko," he whispered, shaken. Meanwhile, Orochimaru looked on, clearly agitated. He had meant to disable Hiruzen, but Naruko had intervened again. Determined, Hiruzen turned to face Orochimaru. He reflected briefly on the path his student had taken, the people hurt by his experiments, and the path he could no longer allow to continue. "Orochimaru. This ends now," he said with resolution, forming a sequence of hand signs. Orochimaru recognized the technique instantly. He reacted quickly, sending the sword flying again. But before it could land, Genma intercepted and deflected the attack with the last of his strength. "Sealing technique, spirit lock," Hiruzen called, as a spectral figure, an ancient guardian of the spirit world, began to manifest. Suddenly, a flicker of movement. Someone had used the replacement technique. Hiruzen turned and gasped. Naruko had taken his place. The guardian loomed above her, a towering, mystical being with white robes and ceremonial beads. Its expression was calm yet commanding. "Why have you summoned me, child?" the guardian asked, examining Naruko with curiosity. She looked ahead, her eyes full of resolve. "I want to seal Orochimaru. For good." The Guardian turned to Orochimaru, its gaze narrowing. "Ah, the one who tries to escape fate by changing forms," it murmured. Naruko gave a subtle hand signal, activating the seal marks her clones had prepared earlier. Orochimaru was restrained instantly. The Guardian reached through Naruko and toward Orochimaru, beginning the sealing. Orochimaru struggled, then in desperation, sent the Kusanagi flying again. Naruko flinched as it lightly struck her side, but she remained standing, focusing all her energy. The sealing progressed, but as Naruko tried to extract Orochimaru's entire essence, her chakra faltered. She managed only to remove his arms, cutting off his ability to channel chakra through them. The Guardian, satisfied with the outcome, vanished with a serene smile, sparing Naruko and leaving her gently resting on the ground. Orochimaru stumbled, now realizing he couldn't control his chakra. Panic set in as he called for his allies, the Sound Four, to assist in his retreat. As they moved to teleport him away, Hiruzen stepped forward, his face expressionless but his aura intense. His features showed traces of nature energy, marking a transformation. He looked down at Orochimaru, who tried to stand but faltered. Hiruzen took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "I was too lenient. I let my affection for you as my student blind me to your actions. That mistake cost the village dearly. And it nearly cost me someone I care for like family." Orochimaru didn't respond, only focusing on escaping. With one final surge of energy, his allies dropped the barrier and teleported them away. The battlefield fell silent. Hiruzen turned toward Naruko, who was now unconscious but stable. He gently lifted her up, a quiet respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Naruko," he whispered. The Anbu stationed around the field immediately attempted to pursue Orochimaru and his followers, but they vanished from sight before the Anbu could get close. Shifting their focus, they quickly turned their attention to the Hokage, who stood silently for a moment before giving an urgent order. "Secure Naruko Uzumaki's body. If she is still alive, take her to the Anbu hospital immediately," the Hokage instructed, his gaze lingering on Naruko's motionless form before he was swiftly transported to his private medical room, where the village's top medical professionals awaited. One of the Anbu agents approached Naruko and gently placed a hand over her chest, searching for any sign of life. Do bump, do bump, do bump." The Anbu agent pulled back in surprise. Naruko Uzumaki was still alive, her heartbeat faint, but steady. Acting fast, the Anbu operative turned to two of his comrades. "Bird, Snake, carry Naruko Uzumaki to the Anbu hospital immediately. Her condition is critical, but she's holding on," he directed, motioning toward her still form. A quiet murmur came from within the group, someone expressing reluctance to help, referencing Naruko with disdain. Without a word, the Anbu agent known as Tiger turned toward the speaker, silencing the negativity with a firm and decisive response that ensured no further disrespect would be tolerated. "Move," Tiger commanded with urgency as the team sprang into action. Dash. In the arena. A sudden puff of smoke appeared at the center. "Yo, are we on T?" Kakashi began, only to realize the area was empty. He blinked, wondering if he had arrived earlier than planned. Turning to Sasuke with his signature smile, he gave a relaxed thumbs up. "Well, Sasuke, looks like we've got some extra time for training." With that, Kakashi placed a hand on Sasuke's shoulder and quickly transported them both back to their hidden training ground. Hospital. Where am I?" thought Naruko as she slowly opened her eyes, only to shield them from the bright light flooding the room. After a few moments, her vision adjusted, and she carefully sat up, glancing around. It didn't take her long to realize she was back in the village hospital, again. As Naruko attempted to stand, a sharp jolt of discomfort surged through her shoulder. Glancing down, she noticed her upper body was tightly wrapped in medical bandages. Recalling the recent battle where she had leapt in to assist her beloved grandfather figure, she remembered collapsing just as things became intense. Still, she felt as though something inside her had shifted since then. Bracing herself against the bed, Naruko slowly eased onto her feet. Reaching for the door with a slightly sore wrist, she turned the knob gently. Peeking into the hallway, she looked both ways before quietly stepping out. As a child, she had often been caught sneaking out of the hospital, usually returned by alert ninja under the Hokage's orders. She had always found the hospital terribly boring. Making her way down the long corridor, Naruko paused to glance out of a nearby window. The Hidden Leaf village shimmered under the sunlight, with only a few signs of recent turmoil, a little debris here and there, and the village gates appearing a bit battered. Turning back to the hallway, she used the wall for support as she walked. Pausing briefly, she closed her eyes and focused, sensing chakra all around the village. Locking onto the strongest signature, she opened her eyes, just as a shinobi appeared in front of her in a swift motion. The ninja was clearly a woman, her elegant form and long purple hair striking even through the standard issue Anbu attire. With a gentle but firm touch on Naruko's shoulder, the masked kunoichi transported them instantly to the Hokage's tower. Hokage office. A gentle swirl of leaves and smoke filled the room as the Anbu kunoichi arrived with Naruko in tow. The Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, raised his gaze from his desk and smiled warmly upon seeing them. Naruko was still wearing a simple hospital gown, the standard for patients. She blinked in surprise and looked down. "Wait, what am I wearing?" she exclaimed, her voice full of shock as she realized she hadn't changed yet. The Anbu kunoichi's shoulders shook slightly, clearly she was holding back a chuckle. Hiruzen chuckled softly to himself, then gave a nod to the masked ninja, silently dismissing her. With a swift leap, she retreated into the shadows of the room. Rising slowly and supporting his hip with one hand, Hiruzen walked over to Naruko and wrapped her in a warm hug. Naruko, though surprised, gladly returned the embrace. Once they separated, Hiruzen snapped his fingers. Instantly, a copy of Naruko's training outfit, along with her old jumpsuit, appeared neatly folded nearby. Hiruzen glanced toward the ceiling, signaling silently. In response, 4 Anbu appeared from the shadows. "Your choice," the Hokage said kindly, stepping outside to give her privacy. Naruko understood immediately. She could continue walking the path of a shinobi. Or go back to the version of herself that always kept people smiling from the sidelines. The decision wasn't difficult. She walked over and slipped into her familiar black long-sleeved shirt and loose pants from the Chunin exams finals. But she quickly noticed something missing, her jacket and her treasured fox mask. She stepped out into the hallway, catching Hiruzen's proud smile. The Anbu present all nodded approvingly at her choice. Naruko returned the gesture, then looked up at her grandfather figure seriously. "Where's my jacket and fox mask?" she asked with a determined expression. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. He hadn't expected her to ask about the mask. Without a word, he formed a quick series of hand signs behind his back. One of the Anbu nodded and vanished to carry out his command. Turning back to Naruko, Hiruzen smiled. "I'm not sure just yet, Naruko. But while we wait, would you like to come with me to the council chamber?" Naruko gave a small shrug and nodded, following alongside him. Hiruzen noted her pace, it was still slow, but already much steadier. She was clearly healing well. As they walked, the Hokage glanced at her. "So, how was training with the 3-cage?" he asked casually. Naruko's eyes went wide, and she snapped her head toward him in surprise. How did you know?" Hiruzen chuckled. "I've seen glimpses of your training through my crystal ball. You did well, very well. Keep it up, and you might just earn the title of Hokage one day." Naruko smiled at the compliment, lightly rotating her shoulder. "So, you also know I borrowed my parents' scrolls? And looked through the forbidden scroll again?" Hiruzen blinked. That part was news to him. His expression mirrored Naruko's earlier surprise. He had assumed her encounter with the 3-cage had been a lucky accident, one she'd stumbled into. He never imagined she had accessed her parents' scrolls. And revisited the forbidden one. How in the world had she managed all that? Council chamber. The two arrived at the council room. Together, they walked toward the front, where the Hokage's seat awaited. Hiruzen paused for a moment, considering something. Then, he turned to Naruko with a thoughtful expression. "Take the Uzumaki clan seat," he said gently. A ripple of surprise passed through the council. Naruko glanced at the empty seat between the heads of the Nara and Hyuga clans. She walked over calmly, sat down, and used her wood release to slightly adjust the seat's size so she could see properly. She caught Hiruzen's approving nod and responded with a quiet thumbs up. With that, Hiruzen turned to the room, ready to begin the meeting. "We are gathered here today to discuss potential promotions for several Genin who have exceeded expectations in recent missions," announced Hiruzen, calmly addressing the room. "The candidates under consideration are Shikamaru Nara, Shino Aburame, and Naruko Uzumaki." Just as Hiruzen was about to proceed with the vote, he was interrupted by a civilian council member who stood up in frustration. "What about Uchiha-sama and my daughter? They deserve a promotion too," exclaimed a woman with pink hair and green eyes, bearing a striking resemblance to Sakura Haruno. Many of the shinobi in the room, including Naruko and Tsume, instinctively covered their ears due to the intensity of the outburst, with Naruko and Tsume reacting most strongly thanks to their heightened senses. Hiruzen's eye twitched slightly before he let out a deep sigh. "And why do you believe Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno should be promoted?" he asked, though he already anticipated the answer. "Because Sasuke is an Uchiha, and his skills are essential. And my daughter, she bested a clan child," the woman insisted, punctuating her point with a sharp tap on the table. Before Hiruzen could respond, Naruko politely raised her hand. "Would it be alright if I used a sound control seal? My ears really can't handle much more," she said, tilting her head slightly as if trying to ease the ringing in her ears. Hiruzen glanced at Tsume, noticing that she, too, was still recovering from the loud interruption. With a small nod, he gave Naruko permission. Without further delay, Naruko moved swiftly, gently applying a sound-dampening seal to the back of the woman's chair before returning to her seat. "What have you done?" the woman tried to demand, but found her voice greatly reduced in volume, much to the relief of everyone in the chamber. Some council members, momentarily impressed, couldn't help but smile at Naruko's quick thinking, even if they didn't say it aloud. Returning to the discussion, Hiruzen addressed the initial complaint. Sasuke did not attend the Chunin exams, which disqualifies him from consideration. As for Sakura, although she held her own in battle, a draw in combat doesn't meet the leadership and tactical standards required for a Chunin. He shifted his attention back to the main candidates. "Now, Shikamaru Nara, votes in favor?" Roughly 3/4 of the council raised their hands, acknowledging Shikamaru's strategic role in organizing a defense squad during an academy incident and helping protect a nearby medical team. Next, Shino Aburame? This time, about 1/4 of hands went up. Shino had offered valuable support during the same mission, using his insect clone techniques creatively to defend the team. And lastly, Naruko Uzumaki? Hiruzen asked. Surprisingly, no one raised their hand. Naruko gave a small shrug, not appearing disappointed. She was familiar with the process and knew that sometimes recognition came through alternate means. Hiruzen, however, didn't let it go unnoticed. Why shouldn't Naruko be promoted? He asked, genuinely curious. The Hyuga clan head stood up. Despite her efforts, her history reflects someone who lacked discipline. Her performance in the Chunin exams was unbelievable, almost too unbelievable. Defeating Neji in such a manner raises questions. Hiruzen turned toward Shikaku Nara for his input. Shikaku stood and responded thoughtfully, "Naruko's energy and drive are commendable, but she doesn't yet demonstrate the steady leadership required for a Chunin. She's unpredictable, which can be risky in a team setting." Hiruzen reflected silently on Naruko's contributions. Not only had she helped in the exams, but she had supported the village in critical moments, including during unexpected conflicts. Her courage and determination were undeniable. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the room. "Anbu Tiger, do you believe Naruko Uzumaki should be promoted to Chunin?" Hiruzen asked. Tiger nodded. Without question. She faced and overcame significant challenges, displaying courage, strategy, and resilience. She also assisted the Hokage in difficult battles and showed tremendous potential. If anything, I would suggest considering her for Anbu training. Gasps filled the chamber. The idea of Naruko Uzumaki joining Anbu was unexpected. Hiruzen gave it a moment of thought before turning to another figure. "Dragon, your opinion?" The Anbu commander stepped forward. Her recent progress is astounding. Within just over a month, she has surpassed expectations. I fully support the recommendation. Naruko sat quietly, surprised but hopeful. The possibility of joining Anbu felt surreal, yet exciting. Hiruzen considered the attention Naruko had drawn during the exams and the potential future she held. Just as he was about to speak, Hiashi Hyuga rose. "This seems excessive," Hiashi stated calmly, his activated Byakugan locking onto Naruko. "Have we truly reviewed her mission history and personality profile? Her past may indicate unreliability." Hiruzen glanced at Hiashi, offering a respectful yet firm look. Then he turned back to Naruko with a smile. "From this moment forward, I promote Naruko Uzumaki too." "Special Anbu," said the Sandaime Hokage as he addressed the council members with a thoughtful gaze. "Have you really thought this through, Gigi? That doesn't even sound like a real thing," asked Naruko, tilting her head slightly as she watched the elder Hokage raise an eyebrow at her comment. The Sandaime observed some of his council members whispering quietly among themselves. What saddened him was that it was the shinobi side of the council engaging in such behavior. Letting out a small sigh, he began to explain. I actually came up with the idea just now, Naruko, so no, I haven't lost my way, Hiruzen replied with a light chuckle. The title of Special Onbu would offer you the advantages of both a regular shinobi and an Onbu operative. These benefits include access to more advanced missions, increased compensation, higher clearance in the shinobi library, and the opportunity to train in Onbu facilities. Your responsibilities, however, will be shared, part as a standard shinobi, and part-time within the Onbu structure. Do you understand? Naruko's expression shifted through a range of emotions, first surprise, then joy, then pure excitement. That enthusiasm gave way to a thoughtful pause, followed by a flicker of uncertainty, and finally settled into a look of focused determination. There's a shinobi library? Naruko asked curiously, causing several of the clan leaders to quietly question whether she was truly ready for responsibilities beyond the Genin level. The Hokage nodded with a knowing smile. The library rarely attracted much attention. Most visitors were either jonin refining their skills or chunin seeking insights on past exams. It was one of the village's quieter resources. Naruko made a mental note to explore the library soon, then turned back to the Hokage with bright, determined eyes. I accept. I promise, as Naruko Uzumaki. A proud ninja of Konoha. I will do everything I can to protect our village, she said, placing her fist over her heart. Hiruzen gave her a nod of approval before bringing the meeting to a close. Naruko's apartment. Ugh. So bored. Maybe a round of shogi? Naruko thought to herself before quickly shaking the idea away. No, it never works when I play against a clone. It always ends in a draw, we're too alike. Maybe some Fuinjutsu practice would be better. Yeah, that sounds good. Opening the fridge, she grabbed a pouch of mixed berries she had picked in the forest. With a mouth full of fruit, she wandered into the living room and knelt before a small cupboard. She opened the lowest drawer and retrieved a scroll labeled Fuinjutsu Studies, Advanced Volume 1 to 10. The scroll contained guides on developing and designing original Fuinjutsu techniques. Naruko was still on Chapter 1, but her enthusiasm kept her going. While some might already consider her a seal expert, especially after she used Fuinjutsu to subdue Gaara and overcome a flame barrier, Naruko humbly considered herself a beginner, having just finished the introductory course. Her unique jutsu, chakra density, allowed her to form seals mid-air, which impressed even veteran shinobi. She channeled chakra into the scroll, summoning the first volume of the book into her hands. Then she formed 5 shadow clones. Poof! Ready! Her clones announced in unison, each saluting with the book in hand. Naruko let out a small laugh. They still carried traces of her younger, overly energetic self. How had anyone ever managed to keep up with her back then? Alright, all of you start reading Volume 1. I'm going to train for a bit. Maybe even stop by the library. Remember, dispel once you've memorized the entire volume. I can still only manage 5 clones for this task, but I think we can work through all 10 volumes within a couple of weeks. Let's do our best. With that, she stepped out, carefully closing the door behind her. As she looked down, she noticed a box on the ground with a small map placed beside it. Curious, she set the map aside and opened the box. Inside, she found something that made her pause. It was a fox mask, just like her old one. White base, red markings, and a black nose. Below it rested her Onbu uniform, neatly folded beside her chunin jacket. She slid on the chunin jacket, picked up the map, and leapt to the rooftop opposite her building. Unfolding the map, she studied it closely. It pointed toward a quiet, abandoned sector of the village, an area that had not yet recovered from the Nine Tails attack. Fortunately, it was located on the outskirts, so few ventured there. Reading more carefully, Naruko spotted a message written at the bottom of the scroll. Do not get seen. She smiled. It had to be related to Onbu, a possible initiation test, perhaps. Glancing up toward the silent district in the distance, her eyes sparkled with excitement. Well then, Onbu. Challenge accepted, she whispered before launching herself in the direction of the forgotten part of the village. Council room. What? Exclaimed Kakashi as he turned sharply toward the Hokage and the council members. He had just learned about an unexpected invasion during his absence, and even more shocking, Naruko would no longer be part of Team 7. She had received a unique promotion, and Kakashi had not seen it coming. He was still trying to process it. He had assumed the Chunin exams would last at least 3 hours, but somehow Naruko had quickly defeated Neji, and the remaining participants had chosen to forfeit. But what about Sasuke? Kakashi asked, trying to redirect the conversation. Surely Sasuke would have won his match, he reasoned. He hoped the council would see the value in promoting Sasuke so that Kakashi could continue mentoring him, all while quietly dismissing Naruko's rapid rise as a simple morale booster orchestrated by the Hokage. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi with a calm but firm expression, clearly disappointed. Kakashi. This conversation is over. Sasuke Uchiha will not be promoted. This council meeting is adjourned. Secret training grounds. Flash step. Golden streaks of light darted through the clearing before pausing at the center, where Naruko stood, catching her breath. Huff. Okay, she whispered to herself. Transforming chakra into something physical takes more effort than I thought. It's not the movement, it's keeping the energy steady. She began brainstorming, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Maybe I can design a seal that compresses air molecules. That way, I wouldn't need to form a dense chakra platform under my feet every time I'm airborne. She lay back on the soft grass, opening her newly earned Chunin vest to pull out a map of the Anbu training grounds. The task was straightforward, reach the objective undetected, and she had 5 days to complete it. Wait. 5 days? How did I miss that part? She murmured. Setting the scroll aside, Naruko turned her attention to the sky above, allowing her chakra to flow naturally through her. With her eyes closed, she tuned into the life around her, the rustle of trees, the soft sounds from the river nearby, the subtle presence of animals and plants. Then something else emerged, a tranquil, natural energy that felt incredibly pure. It surrounded her, even pulsed beneath her. As she welcomed the sensation, peace flooded through her, making her heart feel light, until a small fox unexpectedly leapt onto her stomach. Giggling, she scratched behind its ears. It yipped cheerfully before darting back into the woods. Naruko sat quietly, thinking back to the peace she had just experienced. Is this what true harmony feels like? If so, then everyone deserves to feel it, even if just once. Holding on to that warmth, she stood and collected her scroll, heading towards the long-forgotten section of Konoha. An hour passed, and Naruko now stood at the threshold of the old, abandoned sector. She closed her eyes again and sensed chakra signatures just a few meters ahead. Focusing her own chakra, she took a deep breath, then vanished in a quick blur, surprising the Anbu scouts who had been monitoring the entrance. Reappearing atop a small structure, she placed a hand against the adjacent stone wall and sent a focused chakra pulse through it. While she had sensory abilities, they still required stillness and deep concentration, something not practical in rapid action. Her range extended about a mile, but she couldn't yet use it subconsciously. She sensed 2 Anbu moving faintly within the building. Naruko considered her options. She wasn't about to engage in direct combat, that would be reckless. Instead, she chose to use a new technique she had developed, phase. The concept was inspired by the idea of quantum tunneling, allowing her to pass through solid objects by accelerating her chakra's movement to incredible speeds. She began channeling her chakra throughout her body, increasing the internal flow until her form shimmered like a golden mirage. At this point, her shape was barely visible to the naked eye. With perfect control, Naruko walked through the wall as if it didn't exist. This technique had a drawback: maintaining such a high state consumed chakra rapidly. At most, she could sustain it for about 5 seconds, though in that window she once traveled from Konoha to other major villages. Of course, she fainted for several days after that. Now behind the Anbu operatives, Naruko acted quickly. Using her knowledge of pressure points, she gently tapped the exact spots needed to cause temporary paralysis, just long enough for her to proceed. Letting the chakra vibrations fade, her body returned to normal. She took a calming breath, stabilizing her heartbeat, something that could spike dangerously during phase. It was only thanks to the protective chakra of the 9 tails sealed within her that her body had the resilience to manage it. Exhaling slowly, she leaned against the wall and sent another chakra pulse outward, this time, scanning the entire area. Ping! She sensed something unusual hidden beneath the house she currently occupied. Naruko glanced at herself briefly, then focused her chakra, causing it to vibrate at a rapid frequency. She could feel her energy reserves dropping quickly, but she pressed on, channeling her chakra throughout her body. Naruko knew that if she continued at this pace, she might lose consciousness. Determined, she concentrated on her feet, directing her energy downward. To her surprise, she began to phase through the ground, as if guided by some invisible force. She passed through several levels before gently landing on a metallic platform. Closing her eyes, she extended her sensory perception and immediately became aware of a presence directly ahead. When Naruko opened her eyes, she was surprised to find herself face to face with a soft, yellow mist. With a faint sound, Naruko's body gently settled onto the metallic floor. Standing before her was none other than Dragon, the Anbu commander. Dragon observed Naruko for a moment in thoughtful silence before snapping his fingers. In an instant, two Anbu agents, Nico and Tiger, appeared and saluted. "Sir," they said in unison, standing at attention. Dragon looked at them, then glanced back at Naruko. "How did she perform?" he asked with a slight tilt of his head. Nico stepped forward. "She did remarkably well for a potential recruit. Out of the original 200 silent alarms, only 2 were triggered. Only 2 Anbu on patrol were temporarily outmaneuvered. Overall, she completed the task with impressive precision," Nico reported, her gaze thoughtful as she looked at Naruko. The commander gave a small nod of approval before turning to leave. "Proceed to take her to the next stage," Dragon instructed calmly as he walked toward his office. Nico and Tiger exchanged a glance, then gently lifted Naruko and vanished in a blur, transporting her to the next part of her evaluation. As Naruko was about to fall asleep, the door opened, and in walked Nico and Tiger. They both simply stared at her. Naruko looked at them, then at Mai, and gave a small chuckle before scratching her head with her left arm. "So, do I pass this test?" Naruko asked, glancing at the two Anbu. Tiger nodded before something strange happened. His mask suddenly cracked, causing him to stagger back in surprise. He quickly left the room. Nico, on the other hand, stood silently for a few moments, staring at Naruko before giving a nod and walking toward the camera room. She returned shortly after with a disc in hand and then exited the room. Naruko looked in the direction the two Anbu had gone, shrugged, and then removed her chakra restrictions before snuggling up with Mai. "Well, that was an interesting experience," thought Naruko before drifting off to sleep. "Gana. Is this going to be a regular occurrence here?" asked Naruko as she woke up in the middle of an arena surrounded by Anbu. Pushing herself up, Naruko looked towards the dragon-masked Anbu, who stood in the center of the arena. "You, Naruko Uzumaki, will be facing 2 newly recruited Anbu to assess how well you perform against them. If you succeed, I will inform you of your new position and role. Fail, and you will be removed from this place, with your memories of it erased," said the dragon-masked Anbu, walking away from the center as he clicked his fingers to summon the two Anbu. With a puff of smoke, the two Anbu appeared. Naruko observed them carefully. Both wore identical masks, their appearances almost the same, except one had blonde hair while the other had brown hair. The dragon-masked Anbu glanced at the 3 of them and then commanded, "Fight." Without hesitation, the two Anbu rushed toward Naruko. She quickly moved a hand to her back, summoning a kunai, and dashed backward, creating some distance between herself and the two Anbu. As she moved, Naruko threw the kunai toward them, but it missed both of them. Distracted by her own throw, Naruko didn't notice the shurikens they had launched in her direction. Most of the shurikens passed by her, and she thought it was just luck. However, she soon realized the wires attached to the kunai handles, trapping her against the arena wall. Naruko gasped as the wire tightened around her, pulling at her skin. She felt a slight sting as the wires bound her, restricting her movement. The two Anbu swiftly drew kunai from their thigh holsters, positioning them toward her neck. "Do you surrender?" asked the blonde-haired Anbu. But before Naruko could answer, the back of his head was suddenly kicked, and the brown-haired Anbu followed suit, both of them knocked out by the surprise attack. Standing in front of Naruko was a Cage Bunshine, shadow clone, that Naruko had transformed into a kunai during her training with the cage. The clone had used the replacement technique to swap places with Naruko, vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naruko quickly realized the two Anbu were charging toward her, unaware that she was no longer there. She focused her chakra, preparing for the next move. Naruko vibrated her chakra, causing it to pulse through her body, and with only a few centimeters between her and the two Anbu, she moved rapidly. As the Anbu's kunai clashed with where she had been, she used her intangibility technique, slipping through their attacks. She then quickly delivered strikes to their faces, sending both of them flying backward in shock at her sudden invulnerability. She summoned 2 more Cage Bunshine, who immediately placed restraint seals on them. Deactivating her intangibility technique, Naruko dropped to one knee, catching her breath. Using so much chakra in such a short time had taken a toll, but it was evident she was improving, as she didn't exhaust all of her reserves like before. Thud. 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 3 distinct sounds echoed around her as 3 blank-faced Anbu appeared, performing hand signs. "Fire style, fireball jutsu," they declared in unison. 3 fiery orbs shot toward Naruko from their mouths. With quick reflexes, Naruko sucked in air and activated her Sunshine no Jutsu, instantly appearing behind each of the Anbu and placing seals on them before disappearing again to the other side of the arena. The Anbu watched in stunned silence as they realized Naruko had used the Sunshine at a level beyond even some of the most skilled ninjas. Her speed was so incredible that even the Sharingan and other dojutsu users couldn't track her movements. Ha! 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 Is that the best you've got? Naruko asked, watching as 5 more Anbu appeared. She had to admit, her opponents had given her the best challenge they could. Naruko sighed as she prepared herself. The 5 Anbu quickly went through hand signs, and Naruko knew it was time to react. Wind release, Gale Palm. Fire release, Dragon Flame Bomb. Water release, Water Spear. Lightning release, False Darkness. Earth release, Mud Dragon. Naruko watched as the attacks rapidly approached. Without hesitation, she sent chakra to the surface of her skin, vanishing in an instant. Boom! The 5 powerful attacks struck the area where Naruko had been, creating a massive explosion that rattled the entire arena. Dust and rubble filled the air, and the Anbu, unable to see, waited in tension. The Anbu in the center of the group nodded to his teammates before hearing a thud behind him. He turned to see the water user drop to the floor, followed by the lightning user. Move! The fire user shouted as he and the remaining Anbu quickly jumped to form a circle, creating a small gap between them. Can you see anything? The fire user asked, scanning the area around him but sensing no trace of Naruko's chakra. As he turned around, he suddenly noticed that both the wind and earth users had been knocked to the ground. He had heard nothing. How could that be? He felt a tap on his shoulder and turned slowly, only to see nothing. And then, Naruko's fist was only centimeters away from his face. Crack! The Anbu's mask cracked as she was sent flying into the wall, and Naruko's form gradually became visible again. Naruko stood there before glancing toward the dragon Anbu, who nodded at her. Soon, Nico appeared and placed her hand on Naruko's shoulder, and with a puff of smoke, the two vanished. Anbu commander's desk. When Naruko reappeared, she quickly took a seat, feeling the toll her 2 most taxing techniques had taken on her chakra reserves, techniques she hadn't named yet. She watched as the dragon Anbu appeared an instant after she sat down in one of the chairs in front of the Anbu commander's desk. The commander observed her through his mask for a few moments before pushing 2 canisters forward. One contained ink, and the other was empty. Channel chakra into the ink, then cut yourself to fill this canister with your blood. Afterward, channel chakra into the blood, said the Anbu commander, leaning back in his chair, awaiting Naruko's actions. Understanding that the commander had given clear instructions and recognizing this might be a small test, Naruko quickly used wind manipulation to slice open her palm and let her blood drip into the canister. Once the canister was sufficiently filled, she placed her now healed palm over the blood and sent chakra into it, watching as it deepened into a richer red. She then turned to the ink and repeated the process of adding chakra into it. When the ink began to glow blue, the commander of the Anbu grabbed an empty ink bottle, placed both her blood and the ink inside, and began mixing them to form a deep, almost black red. He then set the ink bottle on a small circle at the edge of his desk. Naruko watched as the bottle of blood and ink became enveloped in multiple seals, which then disappeared, leaving behind only the ink. The commander motioned toward Naruko's shoulder, and knowing what was expected, Naruko removed her long-sleeved black shirt and tuning jacket, turning her arm toward the Anbu commander. He then smashed the ink onto her arm, shattering the ink casing. Naruko bit her lip as she felt the ink flow across her shoulder, eventually settling at the center of it. As she watched, the ink began to form the Anbu symbol, its presence becoming a permanent mark on her skin. The symbol on her arm glowed for a few moments before the light faded. The dragon commander did not look away from Naruko throughout the entire process. His focus remained on her, ensuring the test was completed properly. Naruko Uzumaki. Welcome to the Anbu Corps. The dragon murmured, extending his hand to her. Naruko lowered herself to one knee and bowed her head respectfully. Thank you, sir, she replied, her voice filled with gratitude and respect for her new commander. The dragon nodded, acknowledging Naruko's respectful gesture. Naruko Uzumaki, from now on you will specialize in espionage and demolition/heavy hitting. You'll be part of Nico's team when on Anbu duty. Is that understood? Asked the dragon, his gaze unwavering through the mask's eye holes. Naruko nodded, feeling confident in her abilities to excel in both espionage and demolition. The dragon then nodded toward a wall filled with Anbu masks, each representing a different animal. Choose your mask, he instructed as he walked away. Naruko glanced back at him before moving toward the wall and selecting a fox mask, slipping it onto her face. "I believe you know which one I'd choose, sir," Naruko said, her voice calm and assured. The commander tilted his head, intrigued. "Why? Why the fox?" he asked, eager to hear Naruko's reasoning. "Why deny who I am?" Naruko responded, earning a respectful nod from the Dragon Anbu commander and a supportive hand on her shoulder from Nico. "Very true," said the dragon. "You are excused until further notice," he added, watching as Naruko nodded and disappeared. The dragon turned to Nico. "With Naruko joining your squad, Mai will also be joining to cover all bases." "Dismissed," he said, as Nico left the room. As Nico walked through the corridors of the Anbu HQ, a stray thought crossed her mind. How will you shape the world, Naruko Uzumaki? She pondered as she continued toward her quarters. Boom, 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 boom. The entire village trembled as an intense sound echoed throughout the streets. The rhythmic blasts of explosions filled the air, alarming the villagers. Panic quickly spread, but with a few calming words from the Hokage, peace was restored, and the situation settled. Naruko's training field. Naruko was engaged in a fierce training session, sparring against 300 clones of herself in an all-out battle. Jutsu flew through the air, accompanied by kunai, shurikens, and the occasional demon wind shuriken. Naruko had chosen to limit herself to using only her fists and defensive jutsu. She had been battling her clones for the better part of 5 hours, continuously recreating them after defeating each batch. Each time she summoned more clones, she infused them with more chakra, making them stronger and more capable with each wave. "Gur-ah!" Naruko shouted as she slammed the head of the last clone into the ground, making it vanish in a puff of smoke. She slowly withdrew her arm from the ground and collapsed onto her back, exhaustion taking over. Throughout the 5 hours of intense training, she had faced 5 different levels of clones, each more challenging than the last. The clone levels had been as follows. Academy level. Graduate Academy level. Genon level. High Genon level. Low Chunin level. Naruko had been smart enough to avoid simply creating clones of her own level. Sure, she could probably defeat 100 clones on her own, but they would eventually overwhelm her. The only reason she had succeeded was because she knew her own tactics so well that she could predict her clones' actions and defeat them strategically. She gazed up at the sky, watching the clouds drift by. It had been 3 days since her Anbu trials, where she had witnessed firsthand the incredible skills of Anbu operatives. She had observed Nico and Tiger battle each other in a first blood match, and it had been an eye-opening experience. She had seen how they used their surroundings to their advantage, crafting swift tactics in the heat of battle. Nico had ultimately won by utilizing her blade, as she was a master of Kenjutsu, an art that was rare in the village. Suddenly, a soft ping echoed from the distance. Naruko quickly turned her head toward the waterfall in the nearby lake, sensing a chakra signature approaching her hidden training ground. The energy source was steadily making its way toward her, moving at a calm pace. Naruko dropped into a crouch, preparing herself for anything. She swiftly jumped behind the waterfall and entered her secret cave, staying silent as the chakra signature drew nearer. She could hear rustling from the bushes, and her breath slowed, focusing on her surroundings, ready for whatever came next. To her surprise, the creature that emerged from the bushes was a monkey. Just an average-sized brown monkey. Naruko blinked in confusion, watching the monkey as it stood motionless in the clearing, seemingly waiting for something. She walked around the waterfall to investigate, intending to return to her training. She had thought it was a false alarm, after all. "You do know that I'm right here, right?" A voice suddenly spoke next to Naruko's ear. Naruko froze and tilted her head to see the monkey now standing directly beside her. She blinked a few times in disbelief. Could it be? "Why do you still ignore me?" The voice continued, sounding somewhat annoyed. Naruko tilted her head again, staring at the monkey with wide eyes. The monkey was looking at her intently, waiting for a response. After a few moments, Naruko gave in and relaxed her posture, thinking she must have been imagining things. Smack. "I've been waiting for your reply for 5 minutes. And every time I try to talk to you, you ignore me." The monkey threw a little tantrum, stomping its feet next to Naruko's face. Naruko's eyes widened as she processed what was happening. Was the monkey really talking? "Ah!" Naruko screamed, jumping to her feet and kicking the monkey away from her with all her strength. The monkey flew through the air, spinning rapidly before vanishing into the forest far beyond. Naruko stood frozen for a moment, watching the animals around her go back to their own activities. A few seemed to laugh, but she couldn't understand them. Okay, time to take a nap and forget about evening training, Naruko muttered to herself as she lay back down on the ground, deciding to rest for the day. A mental image of a woman with striking red hair drifted into her thoughts as she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Hokage's office. That voice belonged to the monkey that Naruko had just sent away a few minutes ago. Hiruzen sighed a bit, trying to hide his amusement as he heard the story about why Naruko hadn't appeared with her monkey summon. Another person in the room, however, hadn't tried to hide his laughter. Hiruzen turned his head towards his companion and gave a friendly scowl. Jiraiya. Enough already and go get Naruko, Hiruzen said, watching Jiraiya stop laughing, though he was still chuckling lightly. Jiraiya, a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair tied back into a ponytail and bangs framing his face, just shook his head. He had red markings beneath his eyes and wore a forehead protector with the kanji for oil written on it. Dressed in a green short kimono with matching pants, Jiraiya wore mesh armor under his outfit, which showed through the sleeves and legs. His ensemble was completed with handguards, a simple black belt, wooden sandals, and a red sleeveless haori with yellow circles on each side, plus a scroll on his back. Jiraiya waved it off. I'll just send a toad to fetch her, that little monkey probably scared her off, he said, summoning a small toad with the same instructions Hiruzen had given to his monkey summon. Hiruzen and Jiraiya sat there in silence. Until Jiraiya pulled out his notes and Hiruzen reached for his crystal ball. Giggles could be heard from their office if anyone walked by. Naruko's clearing. Naruko stared blankly at the two creatures in front of her. The one on her left was a toad, and the one on her right was the monkey she had kicked away half an hour ago. So you understand now? Asked the small toad as Naruko slowly stood up. Without warning, both the toad and the monkey were sent flying. What is going on here? Naruko exclaimed as she walked toward the river, sitting down to drink some water. She felt movement beside her and looked over to see a fox lying down next to her, drinking from the stream. Naruko stared at the fox for a moment before speaking. You wouldn't be able to talk, would you? She asked, narrowing her eyes at the creature. The fox responded with a wide smile before darting away quickly. Naruko looked at the spot where the fox had been, then stood up and started walking out of the clearing. Nope, not dealing with this, she muttered. I know for sure foxes can't grin like that. Someone is hiding in a transformation jutsu. She made her way toward Konoha, knowing she needed to speak to people before she started imagining things, like trees talking. We can. Naruko paused and glanced at a tree that, for some reason, appeared to be grinning at her. Naruko stared at the tree before quickly gathering her chakra and disappearing in a flash of golden light. The animals in the clearing could be heard laughing as a small black crow hopped out of the grinning tree. Ichiraku's. Oh Ramen, how could I have forgotten you? And you too, Ayame and old man Ichiraku, Naruko said as she enthusiastically devoured her chicken chili ramen. Ayame and Ichiraku watched, amused, as Naruko ate with remarkable speed, even for her, before disappearing for the Chunin exams and the week following it. Ayame approached Naruko and poked her stomach, only to be surprised by the hard muscles beneath her new outfit. Ayame blinked before smiling slightly. Wow, Naruko. Who knew you had all that muscle? Were you keeping that a secret? Ayame teased with a grin. Naruko raised an eyebrow, a noodle hanging out of her mouth. Why would I show off my muscles to my older sister? Are you interested in that sort of thing? Naruko said with a mischievous grin, making Ayame sputter in surprise. Ichiraku laughed loudly as he prepared ramen for other customers, who were also chuckling at Ayame's reaction. Ayame huffed, giving Naruko a playful glare before heading to the kitchen. Naruko just grinned even wider, enjoying the fun. The customers at the stand laughed heartily. What they had expected to be a simple lunch had turned into an amusing and lively event, thanks to Naruko. As Naruko laughed with the other customers, Ayame made her way into the kitchen, still talking to a group of kunoichi nearby. I'm serious. She felt like pure rock, Ayame said, speaking to a few of the kunoichi who had been curious about whether Naruko was as muscular as she seemed. One of the kunoichi stood up to investigate for herself. She walked toward Naruko and, pushing through the other customers who had gathered around her, she lifted the bottom of Naruko's shirt, revealing her toned abs and chest, and each defined muscle beneath her outfit. Wow! She really does have a rock-hard body, one exclaimed. Look at what she was hiding under that orange outfit. She's mine. No, she's mine. Naruko didn't need to see what happened next. With a quick burst of speed, she used her sunshine technique and disappeared from the group of girls, who had instantly locked onto her. Naruko glanced over her shoulder, seeing the girls about to give chase. She raised an eyebrow before speaking a few words that made them stop in their tracks. "Oh dear," she muttered, realizing she might have said the wrong thing. On the streets for Sasuke Uchiha, it was a good day. She got to enjoy some tomatoes, avoid talking to Sakura, walk around with people admiring her, avoid talking to Sakura again, and finally, get some decent training in from Kakashi. Did she mention that she hadn't talked to Sakura? Ah yes, a good day indeed. "Hey, look who's down there and in need of some attention," screamed a voice from above her. Looking up, all the color drained from Sasuke's face, leaving her looking a little pale. All she could see was a group of kunoichi jumping down from the rooftops all around her. However, through the mass of excited fans, Sasuke managed to spot the one who seemed to be leading the charge. The clue was the bright blonde spiky hair. Naruko. With a mighty cry, Sasuke started to run for her life. "Naruko!" screamed Sasuke as she sprinted away from the area. However, she then heard something worse than all her fangirls combined. "Sasuke-kun!" shouted a pair of blonde and pink-haired girls as they began to chase after Sasuke, followed by the rest of her fangirls. Rooftop Naruko placed a hand over her heart, looking toward Sasuke and her fangirls. "Sasuke Uchiha is a person who saved my life today. About time she paid me back for all the things I did for her," said Naruko, as she made her way toward the Hokage tower to see her Gigi. Hokage room. Naruko stood in front of her grandfather, the Hokage, watching the two summons growl at her from the corner of the room. The white-haired man, Jiraiya, stood across from her, barely containing his amusement as he observed the scene. Hiruzen smiled warmly at Naruko. After the summon's second failure to bring her back, he had sent a shadow clone to her home to explain what summons were and how the summoning jutsu worked. Though, he couldn't help but wonder if he had forgotten something when explaining it to Naruko. Naruko glanced at the two summons and gave them a cheerful peace sign, then turned back to her grandfather. He had summoned her for an important task, though she wondered if it was truly important enough to require a formal summon rather than his usual onbu. Hiruzen studied Naruko for a moment, grinning knowingly. He knew how she would react to this. Adopting his serious Hokage demeanor, he spoke in a tone that seemed almost otherworldly. "Naruko Uzumaki, you are to travel with Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, to find the next successor to the Hokage position. The person you seek is Tsunade Senju. You are to find her and bring her back to the village," Hiruzen announced, his eyes fixed on her. Naruko raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "So, you want a heavy drinker and a terrible gambler to become Hokage? Are you trying to destroy our economy?" Naruko asked, earning a surprised expression from Hiruzen. How could he have forgotten Tsunade's habits? Hiruzen cleared his throat, trying to hide his realization that Tsunade might not be the best choice for the Hokage position. Without proper training, Hiruzen thought, quickly formulating a new plan. "Alright, Naruko, new plan. You and Jiraiya will bring her back so she can be trained to become Hokage," he revised, watching both Naruko and Jiraiya nod in agreement. Jiraiya glanced at Naruko from the corner of his eye. "Meet me at the north gates in 2 hours, Jiraiya instructed, then jumped out the window and headed toward the bathhouses. Naruko stared after him and shrugged. She was eager to try the summoning technique her grandfather had taught her. Turning back to Hiruzen, Naruko gave him a peace sign before vanishing in a burst of speed. Hiruzen sighed, but his smile never faltered as he looked up toward the ceiling. "Naruko. You will accomplish great things." Konoha North Gate, 2 hours later. Naruko sat perched on a tree, her legs swinging back and forth as she waited for Jiraiya. Her mind wandered back to how she had obtained her summon. It had been an interesting experience, to say the least. She would have to ask her grandfather why he had neglected to mention that she needed a blood contract with the desired animal for the summoning jutsu, or else she would meet the animal most closely connected to herself. Her experience had certainly been memorable. Ah! Naruko looked up, her attention caught by the sound of something crashing into the hard ground. To her surprise, it was Jiraiya, her new traveling companion. Walking over to him, Naruko picked up a nearby stick and began poking him with it. This continued for a few minutes, but when Naruko grew tired of waiting, she decided to wake him up with a jolt of lightning chakra. Placing her hands gently on Jiraiya's chest, she focused her chakra, vibrating it and turning it into lightning nature chakra. Naruko just smiled slightly before tapping Jiraiya on the shoulder. "Shouldn't we head out now?" asked Naruko, pointing toward the sun to indicate the time. Jiraiya nodded, as he and Naruko were about to start their journey to find the next Hokage. Forest, 3 hours later, Naruko and Jiraiya walked in silence as they made their way toward the nearest town to gather supplies and find a place to sleep. For the 3 hours, the atmosphere remained quiet. Naruko didn't see the point in speaking, and Jiraiya, unsure how to start a conversation, kept to himself. Naruko focused chakra into her eyes, enhancing her vision and noticing a village just a few miles ahead, hidden in the forest. She wasn't sure why she had decided to try sending chakra into her eyes after the Chunin exams, but the change was noticeable. It gave her an extended field of vision and a slightly slower perception of movement around her, which, though subtle, proved to be useful. While Naruko observed the village, she suddenly detected 2 chakra signatures heading toward her and Jiraiya at a rapid pace. One had a chakra level similar to Jiraiya's, while the other had a high Anbu, low Kage amount. However, both signatures paused a few kilometers away. Looking at Jiraiya, Naruko made a series of hand signs and saw Jiraiya's face shift to one of concern before he nodded, signaling they would move toward the town at a quicker pace. Town, 1 hour later. Finally. Now I can rest, muttered Naruko, trying to make it appear like she was simply going to relax, wanting to keep her 2 followers unaware of her intentions. She glanced at Jiraiya, who had already disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a note. Hey Naruko, I'm going to scout the area. Go pick a room for us. P.S. Nice outfit. Wait, that was meant for my notebook. Go ahead and grab a room for us, okay? Naruko read the note, sighing as she tossed it in the trash. Since Jiraiya had forgotten to give her any money, she decided to pamper herself, even if just for a brief moment, while feeling the 2 signatures still following her, not Jiraiya. Approaching the counter, Naruko flashed a smile and pulled out 160 yen from her pocket. The woman behind the counter blushed slightly, visibly taken aback by her presence. Hi, what can I do for you? The counter girl stuttered as Naruko walked toward her. Hi, I'm Naruko Uzumaki. Could I rent a room for a day or 2? Naruko asked, handing over the payment. The woman nodded, still blushing, as she went to retrieve the room key. While Naruko waited, she noticed the 2 chakra signatures were stationary outside the building, seemingly using chakra to stay pressed against the wall. Naruko took the key with a wink at the counter girl, who couldn't help but smile brightly as Naruko left, practically squealing with delight. Making her way toward her room, Naruko glanced at the key number before spotting the door. Just before she reached it, she tripped. Quickly catching herself against the doorframe, she sighed in relief, glad no one had witnessed it, and entered the room, ignoring a soft snicker from somewhere down the hall. Naruko sat on the bed, looking toward the door. She could feel the 2 chakra signatures just outside. Moving her chakra at an intense rate, she prepared herself for their arrival. Knock, knock, knock. Ah! A voice screamed. Naruko grinned. Show time. Concentrating chakra into her muscles, Naruko dashed forward and, with a swift movement, grabbed both chakra signatures by the throat, sending them crashing through the walls and eventually into the forest on the outskirts of the town. Clearing as Naruko held the 2 signatures, she saw the ground rushing toward them and, using the 2 shinobi to cushion her fall, waited for impact. Boom! Dust erupted as the 2 figures slammed into the ground. Naruko quickly leapt off them, landing on the other side of the clearing. She could tell they were strong, likely more powerful than an average jonin, making this encounter more difficult. She began gathering nature energy, as her summon had taught her, cautious of the dangers it posed. The energy began replenishing her chakra as she watched the 2 signatures rise, the shorter one now with an arm across his face, blood trickling down. Naruko felt her chakra reserves rise to just above half and began vibrating her chakra, ready to vanish if necessary. However, before she could react, the 2 shinobi decided to retreat. Naruko closed her eyes, following their chakra signatures north, toward Iwa and Suna. As she was about to leave the clearing, she noticed a familiar presence approach. Sasuke scanned the clearing, clearly frustrated, knowing Itachi had to be near. He had heard rumors that Itachi was after Naruko, his teammate, who had been absent from their training and missions. Sasuke found Naruko standing alone in the clearing. How was she still here? Was she really alive after meeting Itachi? Naruko? Sasuke called, walking toward her, his gaze narrowing as he noticed her new attire, which resembled that of a chunin. Naruko met Sasuke's gaze for a moment before nodding. She had no idea why Sasuke was seeking her out, though she could tell from the faint chakra signature nearby that he had been tracking something or someone. Yo, Sasuke, Naruko greeted, waving as Sasuke approached at a moderate speed. Naruko. Did you see a man with short black hair? Sasuke asked, trying to confirm whether or not Naruko had encountered Itachi. Naruko tilted her head, considering. The description seemed to match one of the individuals she had recently sent flying through walls. Yeah. Why? Naruko replied, only to watch Sasuke activate his Sharingan. How are you alive? Sasuke demanded, his eyes fixed on Naruko's face, the double tomoe in both eyes glowing. Naruko blinked and shrugged. I've become much stronger since the Chunin exams, Naruko explained, her voice calm. However, even I knew that I couldn't take on the person with the black hair and his companion in a direct fight. So, I decided to use a flash seal on my door, and a lightning seal on the floor. When someone knocked, they'd be hit with a flash of light that would temporarily blind them, followed by a lightning surge that would stun them. I then pushed them through several walls and into an open area, where they quickly left. Naruko spoke as though it was a simple matter, not realizing how impressive her actions had been. Sasuke stood there, stunned. His teammate had just said that she had forced Itachi and someone else to retreat. He knew exactly what that meant. Naruko, the person everyone considered the weakest, had driven away two skilled shinobi. She was strong enough to stand up to Itachi or even a Jonin. If Naruko could do that, maybe he was strong enough to confront his brother, too. Which way did they go, Naruko? Sasuke asked, his tone eager, as he grabbed Naruko's jacket, but she quickly stopped him by grabbing his wrist. I don't know. I was focused on getting out of that area, Naruko replied, not wanting to reveal the truth. She could tell Sasuke was eager to chase after them, but she knew he didn't stand a chance against Itachi and the other shinobi, especially since she had only won by using clever tactics like the flash and lightning seals. Sasuke clicked his tongue, his frustration clear. He knew Naruko wasn't able to track them, but he still couldn't help feeling that only someone with his skills, like an elite Uchiha, could take on those two shinobi in a real fight. Turning away, Sasuke started heading back toward Konoha, his back turned to Naruko. See you later, Naruko, Sasuke said, his voice distant as he disappeared into the forest. Naruko simply watched him leave, then sighed softly and made her way back to her room. Hopefully, her mass changer seal had fixed the walls, and she could finally get some much-needed rest. Hotel room. You did what? Screamed Jiraiya as he stared at Naruko, who was lying on the bed with a pillow covering her face. I made Itachi and Kisame leave, mumbled Naruko through the pillow, as she braced herself for an earful from Jiraiya, who was lecturing her about how dangerous and reckless it was to even think about challenging two S-rank ninjas, something Naruko had only learned a few minutes ago. Naruko shifted the pillow slightly to reveal one of her eyes, narrowed into a glare. Well, sorry that you left me all alone when I told you we had two people following us, Naruko said, before pulling the pillow back over her face. Jiraiya paused, realizing that Naruko had a point. He knew she was right when she warned him about being followed. The fact that she even knew Anbu hand signs baffled him, but it didn't bother him too much. After all, he had spent many years with the Hokage when he was younger. Jiraiya let out a sigh. Fine, whatever. Let's go. I've picked up Tsunade's trail, Jiraiya said, walking towards the door. Naruko just sighed before summoning 10 clones. Poof. Naruko gave a nod to the clones, who returned the gesture before beginning to unseal Fuinjutsu books. Remember, we need to finish volumes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the 2 days I've rented this room. And don't pop until you've memorized everything from the books. Only one at a time, don't want a random headache popping up, the original Naruko instructed, as she followed Jiraiya out. Forest. Naruko and Jiraiya walked through the forest at a steady pace. Several hours had passed since they left the town, and the sky was beginning to darken. Naruko noticed that Jiraiya was glancing between her and the ground ahead, clearly deep in thought. Suddenly, Jiraiya stopped and turned to face Naruko. He studied her curious expression before deciding to explain the situation about the Akatsuki and his plans to train her for it. Kid. I've got to be honest. The two people, Itachi and Kisame, are part of a larger group whose goal is to capture Jinchuriki and extract the tailed beasts. Each member is considered an S-rank ninja. I know S-ranked ninjas don't always team up, but if they are working together, then the leader must be stronger than all of them. So, with that in mind, I, the gallant Jiraiya, will train you to defeat any member of the Akatsuki when the time comes. And to do that, we need to make you as strong as possible, as fast as possible. I'm going to train you to harness the power of the Kyuubi's chakra, Jiraiya said with a grin, closing his eyes as he anticipated Naruko's excitement at being trained by a legendary Sannin. Naruko raised an eyebrow, processing Jiraiya's words. Kyuubi's chakra? Was that really the key to taking on a group of people hunting Jinchuriki? If the Akatsuki were after the other Jinchuriki, Wouldn't they have a way to prevent those Jinchuriki from using their tailed beasts? And as for training, she had already learned from 3 Hokages, though it was only for a short time. Those 20 days had brought her from being a low-level Junon to a mid-level Chunin. After that, she had spent another 10 days improving her skills with limited resources, which had been supplemented by Fuinjutsu. Thank Kami for Fuinjutsu, truly one of the most overpowered techniques. Shrugging, Naruko decided to go along with Jiraiya's plan until he continued speaking. In a few months, I plan to take you on a training trip to help you master Kyuubi's chakra, Jiraiya added, his voice a little more serious. Also, Sensei agreed to it, and he thinks you'll be able to handle the additional training. I didn't quite get what he meant, but he mentioned something about you being like a fox. I assume he meant that because of the Kyuubi. Naruko's mind raced at the thought of a training trip with Jiraiya, especially for 3 straight years. The idea of balancing that with her onbu duties made her want to bang her head against a tree for a while. Jiraiya opened his eyes and stretched out his hand. But, I'm also going to teach you 2 new jutsu. The first is the Rasengan, though I'm not sure you have enough chakra control for it yet. So, we'll focus on the second one first, the summoning jutsu, he said with enthusiasm, pulling a scroll from his back and unfurling it. Naruko watched as the scroll opened, revealing the names of summoners. Jiraiya. Minato Namikaze. Naruko gasped. Her father had been a toad summoner? Why hadn't he told her? And why hadn't he mentioned that summoning was even a thing? If he had, she might have signed the toad summoning contract without ever meeting her true summon. Jiraiya noticed Naruko staring at the scroll and seemed to understand. She appeared to be rejecting the toad summoning contract. Naruko met Jiraiya's eyes and sighed. Look, Jiraiya. I already have a summoning contract, and I don't want to lose it, she said, watching his face shift through various emotions before finally letting out a long sigh. Fine, whatever. I guess I'll teach you the Rasengan then, Jiraiya replied. Quick background on the Rasengan, it was created by the 4th Hokage. It took him 3 years to create, and it took him 7 months to teach it to me. I hope that doesn't discourage you, it's a difficult A-rank technique. So don't be upset if it takes you a few years to master it. Before Jiraiya could continue, Naruko summoned a Rasengan in both her left and right hands, spinning them like basketballs. What were you saying? Naruko asked, grinning as she watched Jiraiya splutter in disbelief. It then hit Naruko. Jiraiya was a Fuinjutsu master. Hey Jiraiya, could you train me in Fuinjutsu instead? Asked Naruko, gazing up at Jiraiya, who looked surprised that Naruko wanted to learn such a complicated art like Fuinjutsu. Jiraiya sighed lightly before answering Naruko's request. I'm sorry, Naruko, but Fuinjutsu is a very delicate art that takes years to master. The only way I could train you in Fuinjutsu is if you pass both the beginner and advanced sections of Konoha's Fuinjutsu curriculum, said Jiraiya as he handed Naruko the study materials for Konoha's Fuinjutsu levels. When Naruko looked at the curriculum, a series of question marks appeared above her head, something Jiraiya noticed. See, Naruko, if you can't understand the basic and advanced concepts, you won't be able to. Jiraiya was interrupted when Naruko pulled out a scroll from a seal on her wrist. Jiraiya watched as Naruko studied both scrolls for a moment, then blinked, realizing something. Jiraiya. In my Fuinjutsu curriculum, the beginner, advanced, and master levels are all on the beginner stage of my scroll, Naruko said as Jiraiya glanced at her Fuinjutsu scroll. Jiraiya couldn't comprehend half of the beginner's book of Naruko's Fuinjutsu scroll, but from what he understood, it was incredibly advanced and impressive. Naruko's scroll contained everything. It even included highly advanced theories such as space, time, and dimensional seals. If Naruko was halfway through the beginner section, she would already be considered a Fuinjutsu master by Konoha's standards. Naruko. I'm not going to lie. You're already beyond the level of a Fuinjutsu master in Konoha if you've made it through at least half of the beginner part. So, which section are you at, and could I learn from this scroll as well? Jiraiya asked, expecting Naruko's answer to be just the basics. I'm 3/4 of the way through the advanced sections, and sure, you can borrow parts of the scroll, Naruko replied, sealing her Fuinjutsu study scroll back into the seal on her wrist. Jiraiya stared at Naruko in shock for a moment, then nodded, deciding to put the matter out of his mind. Alright, whatever. I'm going to go get some firewood. You can set up a perimeter around the area, okay? Jiraiya asked as he saw Naruko nod in agreement. Sure, Jiraiya, Naruko replied as she summoned 500 Kage Bunshine when Jiraiya left. Okay, you know what to do. 100 of you, set up the perimeter, and the other 400, split between tree climbing and water walking. If you find a lake, focus on that. If you can't find one, make one. Got it? Naruko instructed, watching her clones respond in unison before they scattered to their tasks. Naruko leaned against a tree and sighed. She could finally rest. Not quite yet, Naruko, a feminine voice spoke from behind the tree. Naruko quickly stood up, scanning the area for the source of the voice, but couldn't find anything. Great, Naruko. You're so tired you're imagining things, she thought, preparing to settle back against the tree and rest. However, she suddenly felt something grab her jacket. Before she knew it, Naruko was flying through the forest, narrowly avoiding the trees in her path. She landed on flat ground, continuing to move until she slowed herself down by sending chakra into her fingertips. When Naruko looked behind her, her eyes widened in shock. She was at the edge of a massive waterfall. If she hadn't stopped when she did. Shaking her head, Naruko stood up and began looking around, trying to find what had sent her flying. Then she realized she hadn't noticed the knee behind her. Crack! Ah! Naruko cried out as she felt her spine snap. She fell forward, ready to crash into the ground. However, instead of hitting the ground, she was kicked in the ribs and sent crashing into a tree with enough force to embed herself in it. Naruko could only feel pain. Her spine and ribs throbbed with agony, but she couldn't lose consciousness, despite the overwhelming discomfort. She could feel Kyuubi's chakra starting to heal her, but before she could accelerate the process with her own chakra, she was sent flying again, this time toward the edge of the clearing and close to the waterfall. With her vision blurred, Naruko squinted to see who had attacked her. She saw a figure, definitely female, but before she could focus further, the blur grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. Crack! Ah! Naruko screamed as she felt her ribs break from the force of the punch the woman delivered. I thought you would be better, Naruko Uzumaki. Muttered the female figure, before throwing Naruko to the ground. Naruko couldn't even scream anymore. The pain was unbearable, and she couldn't pass out. Then, she felt the woman pick her up by the scruff of her neck. Naruko's vision cleared slightly as the woman brought her face closer. The woman was not much older than Naruko, maybe 16. She had long, pure white hair that cascaded past her shoulders, red eyes with slits for pupils, a face that seemed perfectly sculpted, and pointy fangs. Naruko, somewhat jokingly, wondered if the woman was a vampire, but that thought disappeared as the woman spoke. Naruko Uzumaki. You disappointed me. I expected the one person who survived summoning me during the Chunin exams to put up a bit of a fight. But instead, I get someone so weak and helpless. I don't know how your willpower surpassed mine, preventing me from absorbing you, but now I will take your soul and my essence back. The woman started to wrap her hands around Naruko's neck, choking her. Naruko desperately tried to move her hands to stop her, but it was no use. She could barely move. Naruko struggled to breathe. The black spots in her vision started to multiply as her strength slowly faded away. Her energy was slipping, and she couldn't fight back anymore. She had been defeated. No, she had been destroyed. We believe in you, Naruko. Bring peace to the world in our stead. As the words of her family echoed in her mind, Naruko's vision darkened, and everything around her faded into nothingness. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now, thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your support means the world and keeps the journey going. Thank you so much. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.